With my initial diagnosis of Chainsaw Man Part 2 being a little bit slower than Part 1, I've been eating my words after the events of the fanatical Chainsaw Man Church. As I anxiously picked up this next arc, I had two questions ringing in my brain. Where's Nayuta, and will this newfound life Denji created for himself slip away as destiny commands him to stand at the forefront of the imminent prophecy of Nostradamus? I wish I could say this arc was sunshine and rainbows, but Fujimoto has reminded me yet again of his ability to take something good and turn it into emotional despair and ruin, not just for the inhabitants of the Chainsaw Man world, but us as readers. From Denji being the subject of a grotesque anatomy lesson, to a prison break the likes of which we've never seen, Denji finally, coming? The worst sushi experience in history, all the way to Black Chainsaw Man returning, this is Chainsaw Man. If you're new to this series, I cover Chainsaw Man from a completely blind perspective of never having read the manga, and spoiler alert, I fucking love it. These are my completely blind thoughts, impressions, and review of the first half of Chainsaw Man's Aging Devil arc. Every time I start back up Chainsaw Man, I have to mentally prepare myself for potential catastrophic heartbreak amidst some of the best art of modern manga, endless laughs, and an amazing plot. It's a little bit of a toxic relationship, and as I picked up this arc, I'm continually reminded of how much I absolutely adore this story and Part 2. I find myself questioning why the hell I'd take a break, only to remind myself that reading these arcs without having to wait weekly is such a great experience. Any potential pacing issues or cliffhangers, I can just read the next chapter and it's such a luxury. Speaking of conclusions, with the conclusion of the last arc being one of mystery with Nayuta surrounded by a mob with spears, and Denji's worst thoughts occurring surrounding his inability to ever have a family due to killing his own father. The ending of it was dark. It was heavy. As Part 2 has progressed from Denji being in large part a background character early on to now again back in the front, we've seen this slice of normality he's built all crumble within the last few chapters of the Chainsaw Man Church arc. As we're brought back into the story, Denji is awoken in a hospital bed with one thought on his mind: Nayuta. As if it could be anyone else at his bedside, Yoshida is there and he informs us that Denji has been asleep a full week. And this Yoshida we see isn't the normal one who usually is a bit strange, but seemingly not evil. This Yoshida, contrarily, is cold and dismissive, and he tells Denji that he broke the rules. He turned into Chainsaw Man and there is nothing he can do to help him, and as I'd soon come to learn, Yoshida can no longer stop what the public safety has decided to do with Denji after Denji broke his agreement. I imagine Yoshida's coldness is likely rooted in his disdain for the diverging paths of what his work requires him to do. After all, he does have a pretty consistent relationship with Denji thus far. However, public safety has decided to dismember Denji like a science experiment, likely to keep him fully out of commission. Holy fuck, with the arc just beginning and the Public Safety Commission has already decided to chop up Denji, and just within this past arc, the public safety was literally just on his side, or seemingly. With this agreement of him not turning into Chainsaw Man, I didn't think they'd result to measures like this if he broke it. After everything he went through this last arc, I'm not sure how they can't see that he needed to turn into Chainsaw Man. With Denji being dismembered, this reminded me of a Sukuna type instance where his body parts were spread around. Public safety has always been under the guise of working alongside Denji and wanting to help him, but in reality it has always been about controlling Denji, or rather, controlling Chainsaw Man. Again, we're reminded of this grim reality of Denji's life. Everyone is always after his chainsaw heart, but what about Denji's? Not even the Denji Yoshida ship could stop this. There's an intense moment where we're brought to Denji's inner world where he's talking with Pochita, telling Pochita he needs to get up. He needs to save Nayuta. And Pochita smiles and asks how he can do that without his legs. Pochita has so rarely come across as nefarious, but at the end of the day, Pochita is a devil. However, similarly to the ending of the last arc with Denji talking to himself, this may just be his own inner world in turmoil manifesting into Pochita. This ominous Pochita doesn't match everything we know Pochita to be, so I hope this was just Denji's projection. While Denji is in the inner world, we see far too graphic of a set of panels of Denji being amputated limb by limb. This was such intense body horror as we witnessed the immense HIPAA violations, and we're introduced to where Denji's being harbored, the Tokyo Devil Detention Center, a place so impregnable that it would take a war to compromise the facility's safety. When I read war and saw Asa's legs, I was beaming with excitement that literal war was here. It is time for the prison break, and the prospect of seeing Asa and Yoru grow in battle was a bright note to an extremely dark introduction of this arc. Standing side by side our girl Asa is Fami in their school uniform, ready for the most ill-clad prison break known to man. I'm honestly surprised Asa is still missing an arm, but I guess since technically she isn't a hybrid, her arm doesn't just regrow the way it would for Denji or Quanxi. I had a few questions regarding how they were able to know the exact location of Denji as well, but if I was a betting man, I'd say our girl Fami probably has some inside information. Perhaps I'm reading a little bit too much into the conversations, but Yoru calls Fami famine, and Fami refuses to respond unless Yoru says Fami. I have no idea why she seemingly dislikes the name Famine since she is the horseman of famine, and she literally named herself Fami, which goes in direct contrast to this dislike. Like, why name yourself the short version of a name you don't love? It's kind of strange. However, I digress. Fami is full of mystery and she's badass, and if she isn't cool with being misnamed, then so be it. With Asa reaffirming with Fami that beating Chainsaw Man will save Chainsaw Man, Asa is emboldened as now she will save him, and she turns the weapons of the prison against itself and busts a hole in the entrance in an epic fashion. Asa used her own bank account to quote-unquote purchase the weapon system in a contract that Fami drew up, which is so blissfully sweet that Asa actually believed it. Thereby, that's how Asa was able to use the weapons, which I think is a super fitting restraint for our delusional co-protagonist. Due to the increase in the fear of war, Asa and Yoru can now turn things into weapons without touching them, which goes to show that Fami's intent of powering them up is working. If this is just the beginning of the increase in power, I'm ecstatic as Yoru's power continues to progress. Y'all know Denji's my boy, but I've been such a giant fan of the Asa-Yoru power system since the get-go, and I'm a bit biased towards her power being that at this current point in the story, it's my favorite of any ability. I just love seeing her summon a sword, it's just super badass to me. With Asa quickly in the prison break being recognized as the Chainsaw Man church leader, they did not move inconspicuously in the slightest. I mean, after all, they did blow up the place, and in the highest stakes prison break, Asa falls flat on her face in front of a group of armed men. This continual aspect of Asa falling is a theme that does not seem to be ending, and I can't help but feel bad that she's falling at a moment where she really feels like she's about to save Chainsaw Man. With guns now pointed at her two girls, Fami pulls out another Pokemon from her pocket and summons the Guillotine Devil, who is designed with the face of a pigeon with its lower limbs below the guillotine as skeleton legs. The Guillotine Devil's head design actually looks like a decapitated head on top of a nest, which is a super sick design from Fujimoto. Honestly, can I even be surprised? Fujimoto's always cooking. The Guillotine Devil actually makes this weird sound that I was gonna try to pronunciate on video, but it was kind of cringe. But it furthers the Pokemon comparison, and is honestly a pretty hilarious devil compared to most that come out. Our Guillotine bird doesn't kill everyone immediately and just, I guess, unclothes them, as Fami reveals the devils she summons with her power are weaker, and her ability has mysterious restrictions. The thought that the falling devil she summoned was in a weakened state, it sent a shiver down my spine at the true strength of it if Fami's words are legit. Conceptually, I understand with her famine ability, if she starves them, I guess she makes them under her command, but I don't understand the restrictions regarding their summoning, and I'm not even convinced we'll find out more of that as we continue. However, despite the confusion, given this ability, I'd think that conceptually she could be one of the strongest devils we've seen thus far, but she hasn't gone out even once. Just permanently aura farming, and literally everything around her is a mystery. Maybe that's why I like her so much. Asa is left in Now Fight Naked Men, where her and Yoru have a bit of a positive dialogue between each other regarding Asa's improved fighting, which showcased to me how much Asa and Yoru have grown in their, I guess you can call it a partnership? Hilarity continues to ensue as we are brought to the three Scrooges of the Chainsaw Man Club, who are quite upset with seeing Fami, and they beg to be left alone after she ruined their lives, to which Fami pretty much responds with a savage, okay? Fami truly has no care for the Chainsaw Man Club or these individuals, now that she's achieved the next step to her question mark of a plan to stop the prophecy, now that the fear of Chainsaw Man has spread so wide. I can't say I missed these three Chainsaw Man Club members, nor did I really expect to see them again, but as is the trope of prison breaks, lots of allies will be made in the mission, and I'm fully locked in for the ride. Within the prison break, there's a little bit of a strange dialogue as we stumble upon some of the transformed humans into Chainsaw Man heads, with the man admitting to cheating on his wife to stall time for the Katana Man and the Nail Fiend to arrive in epic fashion, with walls being destroyed and combat beginning. Our newly found Guillotine Devil goes back to his Pokeball, and we're left with Asa flying around and kicking Fami to move her out of the way since she doesn't have arms. With hammers and swords swinging, I'm really glad we were met with familiar faces once again, and Asa is left to try to get past both of them to get to Chainsaw Man. As a side note, when Asa kicks Fami, she seems visibly damaged, so if Makima were still here, I feel like she'd likely be the strongest of the sisters by far. I know at least Yoru is still powering up, but I was honestly surprised at Fami's fragility here. Out of all the ways for Asa to be recognized by Nail and Katana, Katana Man recognizes her poems, which I'm sure for Asa is quite literally the last thing she'd want to be recognized for. I like that during all this time, the worlds continually kept spinning, and Asa's a little bit of a famed individual now. With hilarity ensuing in the most dire of times, Katana and Nail bicker like an old couple, and Katana breaks into a long tirade continually about his hatred of anything and everything Chainsaw Man. Katana might be the biggest and smallest brained hater of the entire story, and these sequences of chapters were absolutely chaotic. I'm again reminded of how perfect it is to read Chainsaw Man in a more bingeable form, because if I was reading this chaos weekly, I'm not sure it'd flow as good as it is now. With Katana explaining his motives, Asa and Katana actually reach a mutual understanding. They all want to fight Chainsaw Man, and they essentially just join the posse for now. It was a really easy talk no jutsu moment for Asa. There's some interesting characterization as they all talk, and it's mentioned that the Nail Fiend wants to open up a business and live a relatively normal life, which felt surprisingly wholesome, and I wasn't expecting that from her. And I was wondering, what would she even want to do? Would she open a nail salon? With the group all now turned against the public safety member, he flees and says he's going to fetch someone who can kill them all. Only 3 names came to mind of who could possibly kill all of them: Kishibe, Rize, and Quanxi. I had chose up the prospect, and I think my speculation for Rize was heavily influenced by the fact that I just watched the Chainsaw Man movie a few weeks ago. With our groups fully aligned, Yoru and Katana both admit their hearts beat for Chainsaw Man, and we transition into the surgical room where Denji's being held. Despite the awful feeling I had in my stomach regarding Denji, I couldn't help but just be baffled at the insanity of these surgeons and their utter lack of care about their lives being threatened and demanding an apology for knocking over the boxes. These boxes were exactly what my worst fear was. They were boxes of Denji's body parts. There may be a ton of humor in the air, but make no mistake, we were looking at utter dismemberment of a human. Someone who wasn't trying to do any wrong, someone the public safety doesn't look at as an individual anymore. Or hell, if they ever did. With the sorting of the boxes, they find Denji's wiener, and Katana makes some awful comments about what should be done with said wiener. Yoru notably tells Katana, however, that she wants Chainsaw Man in perfect form when they fight. Otherwise, victory will be meaningless. Yoru seems to hold on to that defeat from Chainsaw Man previously, and it's what's driving her to keep going. She wants her redemption, and it makes me question how badly she must have been defeated before. Katana's pretty disgusted that Yoru doesn't understand jokes, and Yoru claps back saying love is worthless. All it does is turn you foolish. Whether Yoru has experienced love in her past life or not is unclear, but she's undeniably felt Asa's feelings for Denji, and I believe this is a bit of foreshadowing about a foolish mistake to come, all for the love of Denji. Speaking of Denji, when they find his head, this is the first time Asa properly believes and sees that Denji is exactly who he said he was. He's Chainsaw Man, and I feel this scene didn't get as much time as I was hoping for, because I thought this shock would send her into a state of pandemonium, but with the door breaking down and chaos continuing, there was no time. My eyes lit up so bright and my smile was so wide once I realized who busted through that door. It was none other than one of my all-time favorite characters who I will glaze until the ends of the earth, Quanxi, our harem lord, our perpetual immortal badass. Now the story's made me stuck between wanting to see our heroes escape properly and Quanxi go all out. Fujimoto was pulling on my heartstrings with so many fantastic characters making it back into the story. With a brief moment of our characters' realization of who arrived, I was almost duped into thinking that Nail was trying to be part of Quanxi's harem, and the battle begins, and despite how much Asa has grown in strength, it pales in comparison to the ultimate hybrid Quanxi, and Quanxi without any effort dismantles Katana, Asa, and Nail. However, with Quanxi now seeing what she arrived to defend and seeing Denji's dismembered head, she uttered that an old friend warned her to never make an enemy out of him. I felt a mix of chills and somberness with this old friend surely being Kishibe. He's been out of our story for so long, but despite his presence not being here, he's always looked out for Denji, and in the world of Chainsaw Man, those who look out for Denji are few and far in between. This confirms in my headcanon that Kishibe had nothing to do with public safety's current mission and what they intend to do with Denji, and this further brings up the question of who Yoshida is working under. Given the public safety previously working with Makima, is it possible that the Horseman of Death is in charge of this mission and wants to keep Denji boxed up, and thereby unable to grow in strength and stop the prophecy of Nostradamus? It's a bit of a shot in the dark, but I'm shooting. Public safety's depravity knows no ends, as the public safety worker who cheated on his wife shouts to Quanxi that her lovers are in custody and that they could dump them in a ditch if she doesn't listen and kill the intruders. With karma hitting like a fucking freight truck, old fella, despite being surrounded by a multitude of female badasses, says, "Let me say one more thing, women are," and before he could get out any misogyny, he's killed by one of the humans turned to Chainsaw Man heads, which, unless I read wrong, is his wife who he cheated on. Wow, perfect poetic justice. Quanxi now reevaluates the situation and tells them to kill her and that she'll just pretend she lost and thereby her lovers will be protected as well because she didn't disobey orders. And of course, our lovely cast of surgeons say they didn't hear a thing, and at this point they become a great part of the cast of this arc with all the comedy they bring. Before Quanxi is killed, Yoru asks one last question to Quanxi, and it's whether Chainsaw Man is stronger than her. Quanxi responds and tells her that he's weaker, but far more fearsome as her last words are spoken. Denji's special ability is that he has no regard for his own life. He's reckless and insane when he fights, and he doesn't care about logic and uses any environment as a playground to battle. He fully capitalizes on what immortality is for hybrids. He will do any and everything because he knows he'll come back. Since Denji was a kid living on his own and doing anything to survive, this is merely second nature for him, which makes Denji an endlessly fierce opponent. Quanxi's words will likely be ringing in Yoru's mind as well as it will with mine. There's a big shift of scenery as we conclude the prison escape as we're brought to someone on television asking if she's the only one who can't sleep at night because she's shaking from suicidal thoughts. There was this ominous tone as my mind shifted around the thought of another devil's presence, causing this ideation to the general public. I was glued to the panels as she asks who is to blame for all this, only for this all to be about an idol and their recent scandal. I was honestly taken a bit aback at how Fujimoto set up this tone and only to have this ridiculous idol fan, but I think this was another instance of how much Fujimoto likes to play with our emotions. However, perhaps, and a very heavily perhaps, a devil like this could be out lurking who could cause those feelings, much like the falling devil. Anywho, conspiracy and idols aside, Asa comments that she had her 15 minutes of fame and lost her arm and now no one remembers her. I couldn't help laughing because literally just a chapter or two ago she was recognized as the Asa Mitaka, but nonetheless. As the shock from Denji being Chainsaw Man is still palpable for Asa, we see Denji, and thankfully we're spared the panels of him being reassembled, and Denji lays comatose on the bed. Neil points out something poignant. With Denji there asleep, she asks if this is the kid the public safety is afraid of. The humanization of Denji coming from the eyes of another fiend. With us not knowing the new setting being Fami's hideout, we find her eating in a very unsettling few panels where Nail asks if she's always hungry. This is something I've dwelled on a bit as well. It's like she has a bottomless stomach and she's never able to be satisfied. That does pair with the aspect of famine and hunger, and I can't help but feel deeply unsettled with this hunger. And whether or not this hunger is solely for food, or power as well, or perhaps something even more nefarious. The panels around her eating seem intentionally uncomfortable and not the usual funny panels you'd expect from Fujimoto with such a silly concept as petite little Fami eating a ton of food. Denji eventually wakes up to his balls being kicked as his first glimpse back into reality is a chaotic room full of people yelling at him, and most notably of them, the girl he kissed now missing an arm. Katana wants to fight him, Asa wants to explain the situation, Fami wants to eat, and Yoru wants Black Chainsaw Man to wake up so she can fight him. Our Chainsaw Man Club students add some hilarity as well as they uncomfortably are now stuck with utter lunatics. Despite the chaos going on, Denji has one question. Where's Nayuta? He doesn't care about anything else. If she's safe, he'll fight all of them if that's what they want. He just wants someone to find her. The evolution of Denji has been something so emotional to watch, and the desperation in his plea disregarding any care for himself, he just wants her to be okay. I felt such a big tug on my heartstrings as Asa takes back over her body and asks what happened. As you all know, I love the Asa-Den dynamic, and maybe I'm overreading this panel, but that question seems genuine. She really does care. With Denji now losing everyone he's cared about, Nayuta can't be one of them. As the scenery switches, Denji goes through the debris of his old home, and you can see in every panel the heartbreak in his eyes and face at what has become of his brief slice of a normal life cut short. It was tough to read, and despite Yoru telling him the likely outcome of Nayuta, Denji ignores it and continues on, and he brings Asa along with him, and Asa tells him if there's anything she can do, she'll help with anything. It felt like everything Denji needed in that moment, and I was really happy that Asa was there. However, it was a bit confusing for Denji, and he exclaimed that she kicked him in the balls, and now she's being nice. He doesn't understand her. Honestly, it's hilarious that Asa has this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Yoru, and Denji is evidently as confused as ever about women. With Asa asking Denji to turn into Chainsaw Man and fight, Denji denies the request and says that whenever he becomes Chainsaw Man, everything around him turns terrible. It's a tough dynamic because Chainsaw Man is part of Denji's entire identity. It's inseparable from him, yet this loathing for a part of himself will only lead to his shadow growing more and more. The bigger the shadow, the more it comes out. However, Fami breaks my Jungian thoughts with the idea of getting Denji food and that would fix everything because hunger only leads to negativity. Very ideal coming from the Famine Horseman. Sushi is decided on, only for Asa to say she hates sushi, and for Katana to make his first appearance of the chapter to call her a bitch. Incredible. Honestly, I couldn't ask for a better cast this arc. With them now set off to get sushi, they take the train where Fami informs them of which sushi place they'll go. In the surroundings, you can see the buildings destroyed, dead bodies lying around, an injured family. It really puts into perspective just how much has happened with the events of the Fire Devil. This is the new normal, and it's dark, and I appreciated the world building. With Denji asking Asa why she wants to fight him, Fami explains the motive. His heart is what makes him Chainsaw Man, and the power of the contract exists on what she believes to be the terms of the contract being the requirement of living a normal life. That if he were to break the contract, then the quote-unquote real Chainsaw Man would emerge, and then she would defeat the real Chainsaw Man and then implant a human heart into Denji's body, thereby having him become a normal human. There's a ton to dissect here. Just like Makima, Fami doesn't understand Pochida's contract with Denji. Pochida told Denji to show Pochida his dreams, and at the time it was for Denji to live a normal life. However, as Denji has continually spoken on, and even in this chapter, he asks what a normal life even means. His state of normalcy is constantly evolving, and it's changed from when he was starving as a kid eating toilet paper to satiate his hunger. Fami's understanding of the contract is that it is a stagnant agreement, not knowing that Denji's dreams have continually changed, and thereby the contract can't just be broken by Denji living out a normal life now. Pochida wouldn't impose a contract that wouldn't benefit Denji, and nonetheless a contract that could be easily exploited by some of his enemies. I'm unsure where both Makima and Fami gained their understanding of the contract, but both of them have been wrong on the exact same element. Also, there's some pretty intense contradictions with Fami's intent to have the real Chainsaw Man come out by giving Denji a normal life. Her work with Bayram in setting the events of the Chainsaw Man Church into place, it stripped Denji of any form of normalcy and set ablaze his world. Her actions are quite the opposite to giving him any form of normalcy, and she instead seems intent on pushing Denji to the emotional brink of blacking out, enabling Chainsaw Man to take over. Additionally, I thought she wanted to get Chainsaw Man stronger so that Yoru and Chainsaw Man can both work together to stop the prophecy, yet here she wants Denji defeated. Time and time again, her intent is shrouded in mystery, and even though I want to believe her because I'm a Fami fanboy, she's full of holes in her statements and is perhaps the Makima of our part 2. I really just can't trust her. Now the conspiracy hour is over, and with some dialogue between Fami, Yoru, and Asa, Asa's kind-hearted and adamant statement that she'll save Denji no matter what continually pushes me to believe in Asa and her growth. That this relationship with Denji will allow her to become who she was destined to be, because now she'll be the one saving. Katana then cuts in to suggest them going to a brothel to cheer Denji up. Let's head to the brothel. With the uncertainty surrounding Nayuta, surely Denji couldn't possibly consider a brothel under any circumstance, right? Denji unfortunately can't break this desire, and he says that he thinks it's a great idea for science reasons, only to arrive and see the brothel burnt down. It was pretty hilarious to see Denji legitimately reason with himself and Asa on why this would be the best idea for him. Denji, however, comes to his senses and he breaks down in the street asking himself why he can't keep his priorities straight. With Nayuta missing and his pets dead, why is he falling back into thinking with his wiener? That it's all his dick's fault and that it ruins everything. Denji's speaking from the experience of so many men, and Denji's guilt tied to his desire is something telling of his maturation. Like many individuals who have survived trauma, sexual outlets can often be a coping mechanism, and this is something Denji falls back onto as his default state, especially with his head all over the place like it is now. I was really glad to see Denji's growth in recognizing this. With Denji's state about the source of his ruin, Yoru leads Denji to an alley to cut it off. This very abrupt change to what the hell had been going on earlier in this arc is a continual reminder to how much I imagine the experience binge reading it is better than being a weekly reader. I'm sure it feels a little bit insane weekly with all the chaos constantly going on. We have the prison break, and now we're going to an alley to cut off Denji's dick. And if you're a weekly reader and you haven't read the arc in one sitting, it flows incredibly well, so if you're due for a reread, hop in. I don't think I was at all emotionally prepared for what would occur in the alleyway, where the entire chapter consisted of Yoru forcibly grabbing Denji's privates initially to crush them, remembering their previous time kissing Denji for several, and I mean several pages, and I guess giving Denji a hand job. I was in utter shock at seeing that Denji finished, and then the kissing panels were so obviously intensely uncomfortable. Yoru, in her intent to bring out Black Chainsaw Man, assaulted both Asa and Denji in an extremely strange chapter. This continual instance of Denji's first time with something new physically being entirely horrible is tracked, and I wish I had more to say about this. This was a chapter where I genuinely had to get up after reading and kind of attempt to gather my at this point blank thoughts regarding how the hell this was a full chapter. It was just absolutely strange of a read, and despite the scenario being obviously not okay for Denji and Asa, I'm amazed that Fujimoto will continually push the envelope of something that's gonna fuck our brains. This is one of the few times as well that after reading a chapter, I'll go and see what people thought of the chapter when it first came out on the Reddit forums, and I saw a mix of pretty polar reactions. From oh my god, this is the best thing ever, to oh my god, this is the worst thing ever, cancel Fujimoto. Mine obviously doesn't land on any of these sides. Obviously, this isn't reality, and contextually, Denji was attempting to go to a brothel, and he followed Asa into the alley, fully not expecting her to try to chop off his dick. He was likely expecting something physical, but he obviously panicked when he realized what Yoru was trying to do. And I was worried that Denji and Asa would perhaps have some type of traumatic reaction for what occurred, which I think would have made the scenario in my reading of this chapter have a different reaction, but thankfully their reactions didn't suggest that at all. It was just one of those chapters. With Denji now having clarity, he asks Yoru if she likes him, to which Yoru responds no, that only the other half of her likes him and her feelings flowed into her. It's a pretty fascinating concept that Yoru is so influenced by the resident emotions and hormones in our teenage girl Asa, and it makes for such a unique concept of this devil of war being swayed by romantic ties, despite detesting romance and love. Poor Denji likely had so much confusion from Yoru's statement, and there's not a shot in hell Denji perceived what she said as proper indication that her body is co-inhabited. As well, Denji's romantic connection to Asa in this continual back and forth adds to his experience of not really being able to understand any woman he's ever had a romantic connection with. What brought a little bit of solace to this whole chaotic chapter was Asa's angry conversation with Yoru, with her concern being that the boy she likes may think she's a slut now, and not that she feels any trauma from it. Honestly, Asa, I think with Denji, he's kind of the last person you have to worry about that kind of stuff with. And from my interpretation of these conversations, they were obviously meant to ease the concern of the reader a bit in terms of knowing where both Asa and Denji's headspaces were after. So Denji has now touched the control devil's boobs with Makima, and now has received a handjob from the war devil within Yoru, so Lord knows what Fujimoto has in store for Fami and the Death Devil. With our ragtag group ending their detour and making it to sushi, Denji finds himself ruminating on the sushi in front of him, and that what he just experienced wasn't as good as when he does it himself, but his heart felt really nice. This again was a nice reminder that Denji is a-okay with what happened, and it reminded me of a callback with Makima where she tells Denji that doing it with someone you care about feels way better than having no feelings involved. I was glad to see our boy's heart was feeling nice, at least for a brief time. With Fami gorging herself on food and hilariously being unable to speak, along with our cast chowing down, one of the worst people come back into this story. Barum. Seeing him on screen, I immediately knew something awful was going to happen, and I did everything I could not to consider the worst. Barum slides into the table like he's part of the team and gives Joker from Dark Knight vibes, and he states regarding Asa, like an animal, she doesn't get sad when she loses a limb, that they simply adapt for survival's sake. He also states that devils aren't supposed to feel sadness either, which obviously we know isn't the case. Asa's survival instincts compare directly to Denji's, where she and him have both learned to survive by any means due to the nature of their lives. I don't know why Barum mentioned that devils aren't supposed to have feelings. Perhaps it's an ironic statement because so many times in the story we find devils to have more humanity than a lot of humans. With Denji seeing Barum, he immediately went to kill him without hesitation. With Nayuta, there's no playing around, and seeing Denji with this level of seriousness made me so ready for what I thought was to come. And before he can hurt Barum properly, Barum tells Denji that they're surrounded by public safety, and he can take Denji to Nayuta if he saves them, and tells him to start by eating sushi. God, when he said he'd take him to go see Nayuta, he didn't specify alive or dead, and reading the next chapter was my worst nightmare of this arc. Barum forces Denji to eat and seems to enjoy exercising this control over Denji, and it sets this super unsettling tone, and he says that all public safety, and he as well wants, is to use a small fraction of Chainsaw Man's power. That he doesn't want Denji's Chainsaw Man, he wants the Chainsaw Man with the ability to erase devils' names from existence. Barum, being under Fami, shares the same desire to see this version of Chainsaw Man, the purpose of which though is still mystery. What devils could they want to erase? Could they want to erase primal fears entirely? Hell, even some of the other horsemen? Once again, I'm reminded that Fami's initial motivations to stop the prophecy don't align with this goal, and yet again, at the end of the day, we're dealing with devils. If anything, it looks like Fami's assisting to usher in the prophecy, and almost as if she's working in the interests of the famed missing sister of the Death Devil that she claimed to want to stop. Fami, with working with Barum and breaking Denji, she likely wants to control Denji the same way Makima did. She's pulling the strings behind everything. Even in this instance, I'm reminded that Fami was the one who suggested to go to the sushi restaurant where Barum coincidentally meets to set all of this into action. Barum tells Denji that this Chainsaw Man they want requires two things: everyone's fear and his unhappiness. He informs us power-wise that due to the recent events, he was now on par with the level of fear surrounding aging and sickness, so the only part of the equation left is unhappiness. The next scene evoked such a level of anger and disdain, I wanted nothing more than for Barum to be the first hybrid to be dead for good. Coming next on the rotation of the sushi conveyor belt was Nayuta's head. Holy fuck. Barum wanted Denji to continue eating and serve Nayuta for Denji to eat as a form of justice and retribution for Denji eating Makima. Fujimoto has done what I feared he would do more than anything. He's taken what we and Denji loved and destroyed it in such a horrific instance. With Fami having no reaction in these panels, she clearly was part of this entire masochistic orchestra of destroying Denji's mind, and I had no words. I've learned to adore Nayuta and enjoy every moment she was in the story, and the last action we saw of her was saving Denji and reminding Denji why he needs her. They're a family. For a brief moment, I was reminded in part 1 that Makima was able to survive death due to her contract with the Japanese government, which made her essentially immortal if not for Denji's plan of eating her, and my small glimmer of hope was cut away immediately because Nayuta doesn't have these same contracts, meaning Nayuta can't survive being beheaded. I feel sick writing this with my understanding that Nayuta is genuinely dead. I don't think this is a fake out death from Fujimoto. This is like part 1's Power and Aki death, and it's something I don't think I could be prepared for. This heartbreak is so immense, and Barum and Fami have stripped everything away from Denji, with Barum's intent to just use a fraction of the power, implying that all of this has been a present plan of what they're going to use the power on. After all, Barum states it's to save the world, but I believe it's more likely to send the world into destruction. The immense emotional pain from Denji triggers him to break, and he begins transforming, starting with guts being strewn about his neck. But in the next moment, which I could feel through the page, it is still Denji as himself grabbing Barum's head and ripping it off with his bare hands. It felt so important as a reader to see that it was Denji who enacted this revenge by his own hands before the transformation. Yoru looked shocked at what she just saw and realized that maybe she wasn't even close to being able to stand against Chainsaw Man. After doing so, he transforms into Black Chainsaw Man, a form of Denji we haven't seen in a very long time. This loss was too much for him, and his inner Chainsaw Man takes over. Moments like this almost make me feel like this form of Chainsaw Man takes over to destroy everyone and everything that's harmed Denji, and unfortunately, it seems to have fallen into the plans of not just Fami and Barum, but public safety, as they then debut the Special Division with their goal to damage Chainsaw Man in any way possible. Seeing the Special Division, they looked honestly terrifying and incredibly unique. From looking at the devils, I couldn't exactly tell what devils they were, and due to how much rage I felt from Nayuta and the pain of seeing Denji experience this trauma, I didn't have any expectations for them to even live beyond the next chapter. Unless public safety brought the best of devils, there's no shot. Literally within the opening panels of the next chapter, so many of these devils were decapitated at the sheer speed and carnage that Chainsaw Man possesses. Witnessing this form reminds me yet again that Fujimoto has some of the best art in all the medium. These panels were absolutely insane. With chaos now ensuing, explosions are going off from more public safety members, and in just moments, the public safety's heads are all on a rope of guts in a terrifying panel. Chainsaw Man then eats the ear devil, which now I understand to be as one of the Special Division members, and suddenly we witness this power in real time. The power that has been sought after for so long. With Yoru being the first to realize, everything around the world with ears disappears, and it felt so unsettling. As we come to find out, there's someone within public safety who's able to announce which devil's names was erased, which blew my mind at this realization that this was part of a pre-planned test from public safety, which made me question whether they were involved with Barum and Fami due to how perfectly coordinated all of this is. My speculation for how she was able to know the name of the devil is they had probably done some type of experiment where they write down all the devil's names who go into the death mission, and if they see one of them get eaten, we know that concept is erased, and because they have the documentation for it, they know exactly that it was the ear devil. At least that's my rudimentary understanding of it. And with this experiment, it confirmed what concept would be erased, and then she again confirmed it through asking a panel of people, and no one knew the concept anymore. Again, this is just still part of my interpretation, but the girl who did the announcement, I don't think she even knew exactly what an ear was, she just knew that an ear was erased. With this confirmation of Chainsaw Man's power, hell breaks loose even further, and I was reminded of the International Assassins arc in terms of how much chaos is going on. With Team C now getting to action, we witness public safety with absolute insane measures for the first time in a long time, and they write the letters spelling hits on the glass while stating body parts, only to see one of the most grotesque and terrifying devils we've ever seen. Sat upon a horrific chair of a dismembered human, it was terrifying and aesthetically gave me flashbacks to the deeply unsettling introduction of the Darkness Devil with dismembered astronauts. With seeing this devil in another realm, I knew one thing was for sure. This is a primal fear. With the writing of the mirror being hit, it evidently was a deal of sorts, with this devil having a giant fist smashing through the building, only for Chainsaw Man to narrowly escape before Yoshida grabs Denji, forcing him to spit out the ear devil, resulting in ears being restored instantaneously across the world. Again, this seems so pre-planned. Yoshida has the perfect devil contract for this. This is genuinely world-breaking now that public safety has confirmed the powers of the Chainsaw Man. This will now set the devils and public safety alike against him. They want to use this power as a weapon to control because of how astronomically insane this ability is. I have no idea how this devil seems to have a somewhat nice relationship with humans and even deals with them, but public safety evidently has been on a fast track to becoming villains. A devil who uses dismembered humans as a throne is not one I'd ever want to consider a contract with, and I'd imagine that public safety will be betrayed at some point by this entity. I'm starting to think that with how awful the world of Chainsaw Man has become, that perhaps everything would have been better off if Makima was still here. With this experiment only continuing, we see the Prime Minister of Japan reading off the transcripts regarding never hearing of the word ear, yet after the restoration, the memory of that discussion no longer exists and was erased. Oh my god, this is so epic to see in real time, with the literal memories and experiences being actively erased if it pertains to what was being eaten. Then the bombs continue to drop as it also dawns on me that they're literally with the leader of Japan. They want to have the nation of Japan on their side for controlling the most feared devil. None other than being the presenter of this information is someone who I always felt was keeping their cards close to their chest, Fumiko. And then she reveals her and the public safety's real goal, human evolution. Every time Fumiko makes an appearance, she is more and more evil. With this power, they can make civilization into a utopia and erase anything they no longer like, because it could turn into mass control of the entire world and they could have multiple nations at their knees. Fumiko then reveals the name of this devil that has been contracted, and it confirmed my suspicion that it was a primal fear. This is the aging devil. After this was confirmed to be a primal fear, I knew we were going to be going on for a ride of hell and destruction. Fumiko mentions that this devil's relationship with them has gone smoothly, but again, I have such a bad feeling where this is going to end up. She states that the aging devil has no attachment to life, and that depending on the terms of the contract, it's willing to be eaten and erased by Chainsaw Man. Holy shit. A world where no one could grow old? This is something I always found appealing about vampirism as a concept, but the whole world having this power sounds terrifying. Speaking of terrifying, the design here of the aging devil is absolutely horrific and is doing the I love you hand sign in sign language. Thanks Fujimoto, I guess. From my understanding, given its aspect of the literal aging of life, maybe that's why it has no attachment to life. It's a component of it. Thereby, how could it have an attachment to the natural order of aging and death, but still with the deal with itself being eaten, it seems counterintuitive. There's surely more at play here. Fumiko explains that they still don't know what will happen if this occurs. Whether mental and physical decline due to aging will still exist is a mystery, but I'd wager there's nothing good that can come from this. It's interesting to note that with the ear devil being eaten, hearing still existed, thereby if the aging devil was eaten, likely illness and physical changes would still exist as well. It's kind of a mindfuck to think about, and thank you Fujimoto again for a beautiful story. Fumiko, as the narrator of these events, informs the cabinet that they're keeping his controlled chaos to prove his power to them, and then states that the deal of the aging devil for being eaten is to kill 10,000 children with Japanese citizens between infants and 9 years old in front of mirrors. This is so vile and evil. This statement also proves that this special division were merely pawns to be used by public safety as a show of power of their actual target of control, Chainsaw Man. I have no idea where the aging devil is, but given this continual instance of the mirror being part of the contract, perhaps it exists in some kind of inner world between the mirror and Earth, and perhaps in his realm of some kind. The more I think about why Fujimoto chose a mirror for the aging devil, I believe it's due to us seeing the elements of aging through looking at ourselves in the mirror. As we try to fight against aging with makeup and skincare, and we look at ourselves endlessly, what we see reflected back in the mirror will ultimately always remind us of our limited time here on Earth and the fact that we're aging and growing older by the day. This chapter is so dark because the agreement of the aging devil and the public safety rest on the shoulder of the Chainsaw Man being in the current state he is, thereby these children need to be offered fast. This proposition is met with cold hands, and one of the ministers is reminded of their own children and essentially forced to agree to gather the children to kill, otherwise his own children will die. At this point in the story, literally everything is fucked, and Chainsaw Man is taking an even darker turn than I was initially expecting from this arc, as the wheels are now set into motion for the aging devil, public safety, and Chainsaw Man. Hell, we haven't even figured out what Fami and Barum are intending to do or what they're going to have Chainsaw Man try to eat now, but surely this won't come as a surprise to them. With the panel suddenly featuring everyone without mouths, we see Chainsaw Man has eaten the mouth of devil, and at first I was honestly so baffled by public safety chose these devils until it dawned on me again that these are such obvious concepts to observe and not ideas that disappear, thereby making the experiments really apparent and really obvious. However, I did have a small question on why Chainsaw Man is suddenly eating way more than I remember him eating before. Is this some giant big brain plan by Chainsaw Man to erase mouths so he won't have the ability to eat the aging devil? If so, that would be insane, because how would Chainsaw Man even know that? And also, there's no way Fujimoto makes this a silent manga from here on out. After a chapter of so much dialogue and world building, the last chapter of this part of the video has not a single dialogue panel due to mouths being erased, and it's all action, and we see Yoru engaged in what she's been waiting for the entirety of part 2, fighting Chainsaw Man. Plus, there's a little bit of Katana getting his ass kicked, and unfortunately we can't hear him curse out Chainsaw Man for doing this. This fight, however, was extremely short-lived, and Yoru is defeated almost instantly. In an insane panel with Yoru no longer having any arms left, she stands before the King of Hell and drops to her knees to bow before Chainsaw Man. Yoru has no mouth to summon any weapons, no hands to turn anything into weapons. She's essentially unable to do anything to fight back against Chainsaw Man. I say that Yoru bowed before Chainsaw Man, but I have some suspicion that this isn't a bow of subservience and understanding that she's outmatched. And the reason I say that is because the last panel of this chapter has her eyes completely wide like she's about to do something insane. However, it very well could be shock at the realization that her dream was crushed almost instantaneously by Chainsaw Man. That he is far beyond the strength she could ever comprehend from him. I'm such a big Yoru fanboy and I hope this isn't her admission of defeat, but I do not know anyone at this point who could even potentially stand against Chainsaw Man in this state after Nayuta's death. With this final panel as the last panel of Volume 19, this is where we'll leave off the video, where I had to leave my own reading on a complete cliffhanger with this image of Yoru burned into my mind, and I've been unable to read anymore until I finish writing this script. Evidently, I love you guys. The Aging Devil has been something akin to absolute perfected chaos with a switch of stage and plot like 3 different times in this video alone. Fujimoto has done it again. I had my jaw open at the insanity for a good 80% of this arc, and I've had an absolute blast mixed with utter despair. At the end of last video, I asked if Denji would be able to save Nayuta from Fujimoto, and unfortunately, he couldn't. This arc reminded me so much of the International Assassins arc, but even better, as the world building Fujimoto's done has continually expanded exponentially, and it feels like we're truly getting into the end game of the story. With Japan agreeing to control Chainsaw Man and eat the Aging Devil, the world's on the brink of destruction, and it feels like we are nowhere near stopping even part of the prophecy of Nostradamus. I fear the Age of Devils is upon us, and given the lack of anyone trying to properly stop what's to come, I can only imagine that death is upon the world as we speak. Given the Christian religious elements of Chainsaw Man and Denji being set up as the individual to be the one to stop the prophecy, it's continually weighed on my mind the Trinity comparison with Denji as the Son, Yoshida as the Holy Spirit, and Chainsaw Man as the Father. I think there's a few routes Fujimoto could go with this. One of them could be that the only way to save the world is to sacrifice his one and only son as it was in the Bible, but with the element of the 4 horsemen being present, Jesus, the son, who would be Denji in this case, would be the one to stand against the Death Devil and the Horsemen. Again, just wild speculation, but that's where my head's at. I previously enjoyed Public Safety and thought they could be good, but at this point they're not on the side of good anymore and instead playing their own Game of Thrones for who controls Chainsaw Man. In comments on the previous video, people have pointed out this arc was one of the weaker of Part 2, and thus far I completely disagree, and maybe it's due to me reading it all at once. This has been one of my all-time favorite reads of Chainsaw Man, and as I tell everyone I know who likes Chainsaw Man, the story only gets better with each arc. With such intense character development and never-ending plot that can switch on a dime, the most insane cast of characters possible, and devils that will keep you up at night, all spliced together with humor and horror, this is Chainsaw Man and one of the greatest manga experiences I've had the pleasure of reading and telling. With us leaving on a cliffhanger as Yoru knelt before Chainsaw Man, and with all hell breaking loose with a primal fear, along with the confirmation of Nayuta's death, this arc was doing exactly what Chainsaw Man does, taking our heads and having them on a permanent swivel and forcing our mouths to stay open with both shock and horror as like 2 trains heading towards each other, we can't help but look away as the collision ultimately soon takes place. Welcome to the Aging Devil arc part 2, where instead of switching from prison escapes, sushi, and then some war crimes, instead today it's just the Aging Devil in a pocket dimension. Let's finish this arc. For part 2 of this arc, I did something I normally don't do. I binged the entire second half in one sitting, and oh my god, it was so epic to consume all at once. Given how much action this part was full of, it felt appropriate to enjoy the story in a way I'm sure it's meant to be consumed, in a full volume fashion, even though the volume for this hasn't been officially released yet. With part 1 of this arc, there were so many different moving pieces and settings constantly changing, so I'd break up the reading based on where it felt there was a logical stopping point. But oh boy, the second half had no stopping point in the slightest, and it was one of the most insane sequences of chapters with an ending that had me absolutely derp-faced and ready to grab a beer to decompress from the insanity. As we're brought back into the Chainsaw Man world, we see a flashback with Yoru in a bathtub creating a soap sword, wholesome, and we're taken through Asa and Yoru realizing the extent of their power, no longer requiring naming them or needing to touch their weapons. Which coincidentally is perfect for a time like now where no one has had mouths for quite a while, and I'm grateful after a few chapters of silence we then again see words. Asa and Yoru have a deep felt conversation with Asa asking why she can't just bury the hatchet. After all, she's feared, isn't that enough? And their dialogue is a further indication of the connection growing between Asa and Yoru tells her that she can't just let go. Chainsaw Man ate some of her comrades, and part of her goal is to save them, and that she has a way that could beat Chainsaw Man, but at the cost of her comrades' lives. She would need to turn them into weapons. Her lamentations at the thought to turn them into weapons is ironic because she encouraged Asa so many times to turn things she cared for into weapons, and she acted like Asa was weak for not wanting to do so. There's honor amongst thieves and apparently allegiance among devils. I like to imagine Yoru in her hell has her posse of weapon devils and war concepts that exist, and that she sits at the top of this hierarchy and they're one big family. However, her goal of defeating Chainsaw Man comes above all else, and in a sequence of panels that were some of my favorite of this entire story, Yoru turns her children into weapons, seeing the lines of "come to mother," "tank," "gun." It was unreal, and I still can't get over how cool this was. I'm genuinely shocked that for a moment I thought she was kneeling before Chainsaw Man in defeat, and not instead rallying herself for another giant attack. We see the Gulf of Mexico and the Soviet Union mountain. We see these devil containments have them burst through the facilities, all heading to Yoru where they become her arms, and Yoru one-taps Chainsaw Man in his stomach. It was absolutely unreal seeing Chainsaw Man actually get damaged that much, and with Yoru and Asa's missing arms, they now became gauntlets from two of the most powerful devils associated with war. Honestly, I never wanted to see anything of the Gun Devil again, and it's absolutely crazy to see the return in this fashion. Witnessing Yoru and Asa have such an immense power-up, I was shocked, and I had no idea that Yoru's power could be used in this way to have complete makeshift arms, and the ideas for her powers are endless, and I feel like her devil ability can be used in so many different fashions. Also, the speed blitz Yoru had on Chainsaw Man, it reinforced the gravity of the situation. Yoru was indeed powering up, and in fact seeming to best Chainsaw Man in a game of speed in this current moment. Given that Yoru turned her quote-unquote children into weapons, I'm not sure what this means for the existence of the Gun and Tank Devil, and if she were to eventually release them from gauntlets, would that even be possible, or do they simply remain weapons of Yoru? Given that Chainsaw Man was shot in the stomach, we saw the Mouth Devil was shot out, and then as a result, mouths were restored, only for Yoru to utter the words that are most tragic to any Chainsaw Man fan: bang. And I don't know what the fuck it is about these sisters that they love to use a finger gun and say bang to shoot, but my heart ached for power. This is where the hell begins as Yoru and Chainsaw Man face off, and Yoru begins shooting around the city. There was a brief moment where we saw some of her humanity mourning her children devils born out of war, but it was immediately juxtaposed with Yoru saying children are their parents' property after all, which is the antithesis to how Asa's parents were for her. Her mom sacrificed her life for Asa, and here Yoru sacrifices her children for herself. As we dart around, Chainsaw Man finds someone displaying a sign for a blood drive, and in hilarity holds the sign saying "Give blood" as Chainsaw Man politely campaigns for someone to give him blood so he can heal. Even in this form, he is as considerate as ever. This also reminded me of the scene of the burger joint. As the insanity of what Chainsaw Man's battle sequences are, we see some good old folks in America lose their fingers as we learn 400,000 of the Pistol Association lost their index finger as part of a contract with the Gun Devil, as Yoru and the Statue of Liberty then hit the same pose. With the Statue of Liberty now being the place where the Gun Goddess wraps around, she fires shots from New York to Japan, Lady Liberty and Lady Gun. It's entirely fitting and a bit of accurate social commentary that of course America harbors such a large part of the Gun Devil, and it has so many individuals with contracts with this devil. The juxtaposition of the Statue of Liberty and what it represents being desecrated with ruin as the Gun Devil enacts utter destruction is telling. As well, with the pseudo-NRA members all losing their index fingers, they lose their ability themselves to pull the trigger, rendering them unable to fire any more shots. And I found it interesting that to join the NRA, they literally have to sign a deal with the devil. I see you, Fujimoto. Oh my god, this design of the Gun Devil, it was incredibly horrifying and perfect for Yoru powering up. Honestly, I couldn't help but fanboy as we get to see even more of Yoru's powers, but I found myself stuck because I didn't want Chainsaw Man to lose. Her power in real time was absolutely horrifying, and these attacks weren't just targeted towards Chainsaw Man, she was destroying the entire city. Yoru didn't care about the cost of human life. At the end of the day, she is a devil, as Asa is reminded of this yet again. With Chainsaw Man split in half from their ability, the aging devil arrives to revive Chainsaw Man, prompting him to eat his body, and tells Chainsaw Man that when he does so, children will die with each bite taken. A terrifying moment with our hero of hell faced with a primal fear and a horseman with no clear shot of victory, and with endless children hanging in the balance. I didn't know what was to come, but I was on the edge of my seat. Again, this theme of vor came back with Fujimoto, and the aging devil wanted Chainsaw Man to eat part after part, slowly having the children die and slowly being consumed, and the aging devil would seemingly relish in this horror. With Chainsaw Man pulling his starter cord and holding up his blood donation sign as the aging devil stands above, it was clear Chainsaw Man didn't want to do that, and Yoru witnesses this and becomes enraged because this was not part of her plan at all. This primal fear was getting in her way. She doesn't just want Chainsaw Man defeated, she wants to turn him into the ultimate weapon. This would be the absolute worst case scenario, and Yoru having this power could spell doom for everyone. With Yoru's recent actions, Asa doesn't trust that Yoru would turn Chainsaw Man into a weapon and simultaneously turn Denji into a regular human, and she intervenes. Earlier in this arc, it seemed like they were growing closer with more and more of Yoru's humanity showing, but her actions through this battle showed she's not playing for the side of good. For the briefest of moments, I actually almost felt bad for Yoru when she seemed to somberly ask Asa if she's afraid of her and how much that hurts, which thereby gave time for Asa to let her guard down and give control back over to Yoru, only for Yoru to immediately show it was all manipulation as she once more bangs and tries to kill the aging devil. Damn it, Yoru, I'm just wanting to see your good side, but I think I'm setting myself up for failure with these expectations. With this giant bullet that's fired at the aging devil, it wasn't actually a bullet, it's a giant finger, and it isn't able to pierce the aging devil, and the aging devil brushes off the attack like it was nothing. This was so unreal to see the true power of a primal fear and how easily it can stop an attack that was decimating an entire city. Does this rank the aging devil as a top 2 strongest entity we've seen thus far in the story? I enjoyed it that the bullet is a finger just like what was required of the NRA members, but again, with every Chainsaw Man arc, this body horror is all over the place. The aging devil then realizes that both its targets are unreasonable and sentences them to the Shadow Realm, or more like a pocket dimension, after the aging devil unfortunately copies Yoru and Makima's finger pistol and hits her right back with the bang. Please, for the love of God, no more bang. And it's hilarious that the aging devil was petty enough to hit her with some of her own medicine. As Asa falls like she did in the Falling Devil arc, we also see a glimpse of Denji's dreams, and it was an incredible reference to both Asa and Denji's subconscious, as they're both now in a realm of the ageless. This place was terrifying, and on first glance it seemed like it was just a beautiful, peaceful forest full of trees and nice weather. However, Fujimoto made a concept like this into horror. We see Denji laying asleep and Yoru starts bang bang banging, and it slowly draws on her that her powers no longer work. This realm prevents the use of devil powers, they were stuck with just their bodies. Getting out of here would require more than just brute force. We soon run into another human who tells us how he got here. He started to see himself age, and he passed a mirror one day and lamented growing old. He said if there was such a thing as an aging devil, he'd make a contract with it, and then he ended up here. Oh my god, y'all, we were spot on with the mirror's significance with the aging devil, and although it isn't a giant thing we're correct on, I'll take anything I can get in this mindfuck of a story. To stay forever young sounds like a paradise, but this man shows us exactly what concepts like this aren't always what they seem. Our vanity and fight against time comes at a cost. Is this some subtle dig towards all the push for anti-aging procedures and looks maxing? I say that half in jest. We learn that this guy has been here 82 years and he's the youngest of the people there, and in this world there's no hunger, no thirst, no way to die. As time goes on for the humans stuck here, they lose their mind, and he states that once upon a time there was a human who escaped this place, and this guy will refer to as Mri because of what he ekes out, and he starts going crazy thinking that it's all a hallucination and these people in front of him aren't real. Although just a small statement from Mri, I have been so fixated on this statement that a human escaped this realm once, and my head went all over the place after reading this chapter. I started wondering who it could be, and I thought of Kishibe, but we've clearly seen him age throughout time, and then it dawned on me. I've always commented that Yoshida seems so much older than he is because of statements he'd make, like not knowing if people his age own cell phones or if high schoolers get into fights. And seemingly his lack of overall understanding of modern things and his distance from them all, it all started to make sense to me. Kishibe spoke of his prowess as being even stronger than himself, and how would a young adult possibly be at his level, especially when Kishibe is one of the ultimate devil hunters? Hell, even the aging devil seemed impressed with how he used his devil contract to have Chainsaw Man spit out a devil. His existence has always been an aberration in this story, and to me it makes sense if he was the one to escape. That he isn't just an 18 or so year old, he's perhaps hundreds of years old, and from a different time entirely. He's anachronistic. Yoshida asking Denji a long time ago if he'd eat the death devil, it sticks out to me as perhaps he knows the hell that is life without aging and death, and he was testing Denji to see if he would go through with that, and if he did, he would stop him. I know I'm perhaps cooking with water, but I've always believed Yoshida ultimately to be on the side of good, and I've had suspicion he's been working with public safety to stay close to and protect Denji, and likely aid in the stoppage of the prophecy of Nostradamus. All this to say, I think Yoshida is the one who escaped, and God knows if I'll ever know if that's the truth or not, but shooters shoot. Having so many parallels in terms of the pocket realms of the Eternity Devil, it seemed like an easy strategy for Asa to do the same as she did before, but given the aging devil's realms nullifies any devil abilities, a new strategy is in order. Surprisingly, the aging devil's power greatly upset Yoru and had her start doubting her own strength and fixating on the fact that the aging devil is more powerful than her. Similarly to her fixation with Chainsaw Man, anything that makes her question her own strength makes her mentally implode. This results in her hitting a tree, only for the tree to be partially human decayed into a tree. Holy fuck, the entire serene forest took on a whole completely new meaning in this moment. They were surrounded by death. If an individual lives 1,000 years in the forest, the humans turn to trees, and once the trees rot, they return to the real world. However, I doubt the legitimacy of that. Perhaps only at that point can they truly die. There's innumerable trees in this forest, and I can't even fathom how so many humans were subjected to this pocket dimension. Does the aging devil pick and choose who goes into there, or are these all people who, similarly to our crazy man Marie, all made a contract with it? With Denji remaining on the floor since we've seen him in this forest, he once more reaches a state of despair. Everyone who he's close to ends up miserable or dead. In this case, Asa and Nayuta is no exception. Similarly to part 1, Black Chainsaw Man takes over when Denji no longer has a will to live and when he enters into such a deeply negative state of being. He's yet again at a turning point. What is his reason to live? And I find myself so deeply feeling for Denji. Despite everything he's done to turn his life around, once more he's without anything. Yoru, in trying to console Denji, she does the only thing she knows how to do with Denji, and she kisses him and tells him to help her come up with an escape plan. Denji freaks out because this was surely not the time for this and asks why, and Yoru says cause you're cute when you cry. As much as I want Yoru to actually be good-natured in this, again, I think she's just trying to get what she wants, and in this case, it's to escape. Denji hilariously states that his life alternates between sexy and terrible, and when he gets horny, all he can think about is sex, and he can't have any internal thoughts. However, jokes aside, it's refreshing to see Denji's growth as we slowly throughout the story see him become more and more mature. Denji at this moment felt hopeless, and Yoru first tells Denji he can get over it, but Asa intervenes and tells Denji her story of how she ended up where she is. That she felt responsible for the death of her mom. That she replays over and over what would have happened if she hadn't tripped. If she could go back in time now with her strength now, how different things could have been. And Denji poignantly asks how he could possibly get over it. And Asa very truthfully says it's not possible, but there's still something to live for. And I started tearing up when reading this because although my mom didn't die through the results of a devil attack, my mom did pass away 3 years ago, and that loss and pain never goes away. But you keep moving forward and keep finding things to live for even when it's hard. Asa's reflection on this loss felt so extremely real and close to me, and it was such a beautiful moment for me in this arc. The tears kept coming and Denji vomits up the snow devil and remembers his day with Power and Aki. It was such a beautiful day with such amazing memories of people he cherished. The next devil he vomits up, I almost got out of my chair. It was the bitterness devil, and he was reminded of coffee with Rize, and it dawned on me that Pochita was reminding Denji of some of his most beautiful memories he forgot. A reminder of what being alive means. That even though he suffered time and time again, there was always a part of life that he could find joy in. And to quote Denji with one of his best quotes of all time, I have a feeling I'll be hopeless the rest of my life. But the sushi I ate earlier tasted delicious, and I popped a boner a minute ago too, so as long as this world still has grub and girls, I have something to look forward to. What an insane line from Denji, and it's beautiful how quickly he turned around, and although it doesn't sound too heartfelt reading it, given it's Denji, this is probably the most heartfelt thing he could utter. I honestly forgot that several chapters back Chainsaw Man ate the Snow Devil, the Bitterness Devil, and the Octopus Devil, so it's almost like Pochita saw this coming and ate them for this very moment. I really like how Pochita's taken a more active role in the second part of Chainsaw Man, and we're slowly, and I mean super slowly, getting more characterization out of Pochita. With the Denji's insane brain putting pieces together now that he's feeling better, he determines that Chainsaw Man's stomach is in the real world and realizes how they could get out. Denji then embarks on his best impression of a cross-country meet, and he begins running around the woods without really explaining himself. Epic. The Aging Devil then appears in the realm to try to reason with Denji to convince Pochita to eat the Aging Devil, but after all, Chainsaw Man's a superhero, and he would never do anything like that, like sacrifice children. The dialogue here is pretty hilarious with both Denji and the Aging Devil kind of bickering a bit, with the Aging Devil being confused at Denji's sudden change of heart, and Denji tells the Aging Devil he'll find family again, and if they die, he'll find a new family. I understand the intent of his statement, but it came out a bit wrong. However, Denji has such a unique way of dealing with his emotions, and with this change of heart, he seems entirely invulnerable to emotional damage for these moments. He'll just keep getting back up and trying again. I've once said that Denji is like the Doom guy, except he's motivated by sex, and I still agree with that, but let's add family to that mix as well. I didn't think a primal fear could really be baffled, but folks, here we are. Both Pochita and Denji cannot be reasoned with, and that just shows why their synergy is so great. The Aging Devil then starts to lay out why it's doing what it's doing. It states that turning humans into trees is innate when they reach the culmination of thought, and I'm still a bit baffled as to what the Aging Devil means by this. However, its motivation seems to be that if they were to live longer, humans could discover things completely unknown, and the Aging Devil wants to see that outcome. This framing has the Aging Devil seemingly having a somewhat pro-human ideology, but perhaps it's one out of morbid curiosity of just what humans could do. And in this moment, it finally clicked why the aging devil wants children as payment. They are newly into this world, and their youth is one of the most desired things in the world as us humans age and grow old. I have no idea why it clicked here, but it sure did. Denji then unveils his escape plan, and as I was reading these chapters, I truly thought Denji's plan would be asinine, and I'm genuinely shocked that his plan after running around so long was actually a legitimate, well thought out plan and not some meme. However, his plan revolves around hunger, which is something Denji knows far too well. He wants to make himself hungry enough to eat, and he then wields a makeshift axe, which is a nice callback to his old days of cutting trees, and he starts cutting tree people with a ton of gore. I didn't know whether to be impressed or grossed out, as Denji's plan to revive Chainsaw Man over and over again consists of him eating the guts and innards of tree people. This was like LeBron catching Dwayne Wade's alley-oop, with Denji now giving Pochita an endless amount of blood that he so desperately needed to fight back. And for perhaps the first time in the story, Denji is now the one helping Pochita fight. Fujimoto was honestly cooking so hard this arc. With the public safety now knowing what's to come, I was reminded of when Goku falls into the void and the gods of destruction in the Tournament of Power say, "He's coming," as there is nothing they can do to stop Chainsaw Man with Denji's plan, but they sure as hell tried, as public safety pledges their life to be used by the aging devil to stop our King of Hell. As they sacrifice parts of their body to damage Chainsaw Man, he just keeps coming. Seeing Fumiko seem genuinely concerned with the prophecy coming true, and believing stopping aging could perhaps be the only way to stop it, it revealed more of her mysterious character, and I started to wonder if she was on the side of good after all. These sequences of panels throughout this fight were so gory, and it was constant dismemberment and eyeballs popping out. It was absolutely metal, and I'm again reminded of how great Fujimoto is at drawing fights, where every panel makes the fight almost seem animated, if that makes sense. Hell, we even see adorable little Pochita as a heart fly out before having its body reform around it. And with Pochita finally in front of the aging devil, it doesn't seem like the aging devil can really die despite feeling so much pain. I suppose given the aging devil can create eternal dimensions and is something quite literally as old as time, perhaps the aging devil is essentially immortal. With the Denji continuing to chop, Morigai screams out that Denji is a devil, as we're juxtaposed with Denji's face full of blood from while he's eaten, and Pochita bisecting the aging devil. At this point, I had no idea how they'd be able to kill the aging devil, because despite the aging devil being able to take damage, its body was constantly regenerating. It's almost as if the aging devil could restore its body to a previous age before the damage, and Denji, not knowing what to do either, tells Pochita to barf up a devil that could help. Another great Denji idea, and holy shit, the moment I saw Denji's mouth open with a foot coming out of it, I had my mouth open damn near as much as Denji. Out comes Yoshida, and I was so incredibly happy, and I knew that Fujimoto would never off-screen such a central character like Yoshida. Similar to myself, also was shocked, and she was now face to face with the person who took her arms, only for Yoshida to be confused that she still has both arms. Yoshida's nonchalance with coming out of Denji's mouth was everything I'd expect from him, but after my shock slowly faded, I started to have a ton of questions. Denji told Pochita to cough up any devils, and previously it was devils that came out of Denji's mouth, but this time it was Yoshida himself, a supposed human. It almost seemed too on the nose. Yoshida has somehow been alive in Pochita's stomach and completely fine, and then I began to think about his contract with the Octopus Devil and Octopi and their ability to camouflage and change form. Was Yoshida this entire time a devil and never a human from the get-go? This would explain why he's so out of the loop of how young people are supposed to act, and why he feels so much like an aberration in the story amongst literally the most strange humans. I speculated that maybe indeed we just stumbled into one of the biggest reveals of this arc, but I guess we'll find out. Yoshida is all about business when he comes out, and he gets immediately caught up with what's happened. And Yoshida seems out of the loop, and he determines if the aging devil is communicative, then it's probably working with public safety. However, given Yoshida's seemingly important status in public safety, why would he not have prior knowledge of the aging devil, whereas Fumiko did? This again makes me think that maybe even public safety is suspicious of him. Yoshida then strikes up a truce amongst this incredibly insane trio, and Yoshida brings up a story that the best way to get rid of a bear is to have both the person and the bear return to their respective worlds. The person back into their town, the bear back into the forest. That hostility towards each other isn't beneficial to either party and only adds to death. At the time, I was a bit confused at the meaning of this, and I reread it several times and came to the conclusion that the aging devil is the bear who should be back in the literal woods it's created. The comedy throughout Chainsaw Man is something I've always loved throughout the story, that even in moments of seriousness, there's always so much fun to be had, and Yoshida asks Aso for forgiveness for cutting off her arms, since after all they regrew, and it was peak Yoshida not reading the room. I mean, if you're trapped in an eternal pocket dimension, I feel having a trio of very atypical thinkers probably gives you the best chance of getting out in one piece. Yoshida being the champion of ideas and once again making Yoshida's freaky counter towards Denji go up, he asks if his stomach is connected to Pochita's and proceeds to ask if he can put his hand in his mouth. Unreal. Out of the mouth of Chainsaw Man comes a hand shooting an octopus tentacle out of it. Oh my god, Yoshida is a genius, and we may have very well found our way out. However, that doesn't address the problem of getting the bear back into the woods, only the people back into town. Denji's mouth is so wide, and the panels with Denji having far too much in his mouth were a bit uncomfortable to read. It felt like corner peeking in a video game where Yoru would put her hand out to shoot without really seeing where the shot went and then pulling her hand back, which led to Yoru eventually putting her full torso through Denji's mouth, which is a really weird sentence to say out loud. And with Yoru's torso in the real world, unfortunately another bang occurs and ages Yoru and Asa so fast, it was terrifying to see this ability on her. Her skin became so aged and sagging and almost melting into itself, and is a nightmare for anyone vain, Yoru being no exception, and she asks as her first question back, "Am I beautiful?" I love how Yoru, despite being a devil, is still so fixated on her appearance, and she's enraged that the aging devil would tamper with her beauty. As Yoshida continues to contemplate a win condition, he fixates on how devil powers don't work in the world, and I started to realize where he was going and what he was cooking. There in the woods. The aging devil repeats the line of hostility only adds to the body count, which confirmed that the aging devil can hear everything going on in its world without being there. Pretty amazing of a power with omnipresence there, perfectly fitting for a primal fear. With so much of public safety losing parts of their body from the aging devil, there was carnage everywhere, and the sequence of chapters have been so much blood and destruction. In the midst of all this chaos, I didn't think I could be shocked anymore. However, as we watch Fumiko on the floor on the brink of death, and as I feared for her life, utter shock came over me as I saw that an identical copy of Fumiko stands above her and states that she's still alive, that in her dying moment she'd side with the likely winner, and she gives Yoshida her heart. Holy fuck, the ever-increasing mystery of Fumiko increases, and she reveals one of her powers. She seemingly has the ability to have two of herself, two bodies who are separate entities entirely, and I began to question what devil she could have. Perhaps she made a contract with the twin devil, since twins in old time were bad luck, so perhaps there was enough fear of twins, thereby creating a devil, or the doppelganger devil, which is a very real fear even today. Nonetheless, this devil contract, from my speculation, allows her to create two of herself, and this entire time she was never at risk of death or pain in her main body with the aging devil. It was always the clone or doppelganger or twin. What an insane twist to her, but even more insane is that she realized in that moment that the aging devil was on the losing side and she switched her allegiance. I was so ecstatic at this, and also incredibly confused at how she's able to communicate with Yoshida despite being in separate dimensions, but I speculated that it's probably just Yoshida's octopus powers being able to perceive communication through vibration, and he probably has some suction cup on the outside that he placed whenever he stuck his hand out. As well, whenever she said she'd take the side of the winner, she almost confirms that the other side of the aging devil and public safety is Yoshida, which means that Yoshida has his own objective, which explains why he wasn't in on the aging devil and public safety's mission. With Fumiko giving up her heart and Yoshida giving it to the octopus devil manifests and swallows everything in the building, along with my theory that Yoshida was in fact the octopus devil. After all, we literally just see the octopus devil now, and it's not Yoshida. The aging devil was now faced with immense darkness, almost looking like the vastness of space, questioning if he was eaten by Chainsawman, if this was true oblivion. These panels were incredible, but this was no void, this was the inside of an octopus. And Marie states that they all believed in the aging devil, and he asked how they could send that devil to their world. This devil not being Chainsawman, but Denji, which broke me out of the seriousness of the scene, and Marie grabs the aging devil and pulls the aging devil into the mouth of Chainsawman and into the pocket dimension. It makes sense that Marie and some of the others would view the aging devil as a god of sorts, but Marie lost faith in the aging devil because no god would send someone as insane as Denji into their realm to wreak havoc. Denji's insanity scares even those who are in a hellscape. With the aging devil and prime minister both now in the ageless world, I was glad to see the prime minister bastard used as a chair for the aging devil, and knowing that he too would be in the dimension was icing on the cake. The aging devil was now face to face with Asa, Yoshida, and Denji. The bear was now in the woods, but the people were still in the forest. Yoshida asked to make a contract with each other and to return to their worlds and never fight each other again. And if the aging devil refused, Denji would let them all back in through his mouth, and the aging devil would be stuck with Denji forever. As the aging devil contemplated this proposition, I was expecting several pages of dialogue. After all, it's the last chapter of this arc, and maybe some aftermath of all the carnage, but literally the next page was Fami, Yoshida, Asa, Fumiko, and Denji all at a cafe together ordering food and drinks as Chainsawman heads were being hunted down, as they happily state that it's great to return to the real world. I genuinely thought that the website I was reading on was missing pages, but no. Just like that, we were back to Chainsaw Man's version of a normal world, and the overwhelming primal fear of the aging devil was gone. We sit around the table as if nothing at all had changed. No indication of what the hell any of the aftermath was, and it almost felt like Fujimoto pulling the curtain on us after so much intense chaos that transpired over the course of this entire arc. Hell, I guess our version of closure for this arc is that the Marie guy now works a regular life as a construction worker, and the Prime Minister thankfully remains in that pocket dimension. But like every conclusion to every arc in the history of Chainsaw Man, except maybe the Control Devil arc, I'm left baffled by where Fujimoto leaves us after all of that. This calmness in comparison seems so opposite to everything we've experienced thus far. There was no gradual letdown to let my anxiety spike this entire arc dissipate. It was cold turkey, thereby forming that toxic relationship I have with the story. With them sitting around the table, I was honestly angry that Fami is there as if nothing happened, as if she isn't connected to Barum who killed Nayuta. However, I'm sure in the next arc this giant family question will come to a head. This has genuinely been one of the most insane arcs of Chainsaw Man thus far, and sure as hell one of the most enjoyable to binge read. I can only imagine the pains of having to read this arc week by week, because some of these chapters were entirely action. Reading it all at once made the pacing make sense and everything feel connected, and I'm reminded of the luxury it is not to wait week to week. I have such mixed feelings about the end of this arc, and I don't think I'd be reading a Fujimoto story if I didn't. He's taken us through the entire spectrum of emotions, and he's conditioned us now like Denji and the gang to be relieved to be back in the normal world where there are people running around with chainsaws on their head being hunted down by the public safety and brutally killed. I can't believe that that's genuinely my feeling of normalcy in this story. The aspect of not being able to fight against aging is so perfect for everything that devil represents. You can do everything in your power to fight, but ultimately aging cannot be beaten. The ending of this devil also is ideal for a primal fear. The aging devil's power was beyond comprehension. After all, primal fears are devils that have never been killed. I think this is fantastic for the power scaling of primal fears. As well, them ending their conflict through a contract is forever insurance that they won't have to deal with the aging devil again, because devils do not break contracts. Adding characterization to a primal fear like this was so unique as well, and the aging devil had quite a good bit of personality as well, with it being petty enough to use Yoru's bang against her, and its fear of the concept of spending forever with Denji. Honestly, the aging devil is pretty funny. I loved in the last parts of this arc, we see our insane trio of Asa, Denji, and Yoshida, and it's absurd that Yoshida isn't actually a devil, he's just a human that is so strong where he can survive in Pochita's stomach, further adding to this ridiculous inhuman strength. So the theory I'm going with is that he is the one to escape the aging devil, and that's the only way it can make sense to me for him to be this strong. I can only imagine in the next arc we'll get more of them together, with Fumiko and Fami added, which is an S-tier group to follow. Although in that group there is not one reasonable person whatsoever. Well, is anyone in Chainsaw Man reasonable to begin with? Despite being 190 chapters in, my questions with characters in the story only grow the further I get in, and damn, that's a good place to be. Fumiko's mysterious reveal shocked me this arc, and hell, it even shocked the primal fear. I really am locked in with my theory of what devil she's potentially contracted with, and I can't wait to see more of Fumiko. There were so many potential MVPs during this half of the arc with the aging devil, and although everyone played a huge role in getting out of that dimension, Denji takes the MVP with some of the best strategy I've seen him use this entire story. His strategy did involve eating and hunger, so I'm sure that's in part why he was able to pull off such a great plan. With all the key players Fujimoto has made the focus of in part 2 together, we are continuing to reach peak Chainsaw Man. On this roller coaster of a story, I find myself with my hands in the air screaming and full of fear and joy, hoping this ride never stops. What will happen next? Will Fami's grand plan finally come to light as she pulls the strings for this story? Will our group unite together to stop the prophecy? Will the days of the Death Devil's arrival to Earth soon be upon us? And most importantly, will Denji continue to inspire us to keep pushing forward? I guess we'll find out next time. If you stuck around this long, please do consider dropping a subscription to see more videos just like this. This has been hiXtrah, and as always, be greedier, and I will catch you all next time.